don't you even think about eating these food items if you've got high blood pressure. So in this video, I'll tell you about top 10 food items that you should try to avoid if you've got hypertension. And this, combined with your medications, is the best way that you can control your blood pressure. So after a long and tiring Friday, I bet you'd love to have a Chinese takeout. But the beef and broccoli in that takeout is usually adding up to about 3,000 milligrams of salt in it. Now, adding soy sauce on top of it actually adds another 1,000 milligrams. If you're a hypertensive patient, ideally you should not have more than 2,300 milligrams in a given day. And here you have it. In that single takeout, you're basically eating about 4,000 milligrams of salt. Now, unless you happen to be an athlete who happens to sweat a lot and lose a lot of salt, you should try to control the intake that you have every day. Now, the second most common diet that we usually consume are the canned beans. And each 12-ounce canned bean contains about 1,800 milligrams of salt in it. There are low sodium versions as well. One of them usually contains about 500 milligrams, but what you need to do is basically start reading the labels. Now, one of the other things that you should avoid are the coffee creamers. They contain in them a lot of thickeners, unhealthy oils, and sweeteners at times, which haven't been proven obviously to help the health, but unfortunately in some cases, like in some sweetener tests, they've been proven to be unhealthy. Now, the other food item to actually be careful about is the ketchup. Now, a single tablespoon of ketchup usually contains about 150 milligrams of salt and about 4 to 5 milligrams of sugar in it. But the problem arises when you start taking more and more of it, and it starts adding up. Now, it's not just a bad option for your high blood pressure, but it's also not a good option when it comes to the weight loss as well. The other food items that you need to be careful about are breakfast cereals. Now, I've got nothing against them, but the only key thing here to see is the sugar or the amount of sugar that they contain. Especially read the labels if you can, and some of them even have the word sugar or sweet in their names. So be careful about that, because things can add up, and subsequently a high calorie diet is not good for a person with high blood pressure. Right, so one of the other food items usually that you should be careful about are pickles. Now, I myself love pickles, but again the problem is the salt amount. Now, each single or a small amount of pickle that usually is the standard size, it contains about 800 milligrams of salt in it, which is about half of your daily recommended salt intake if you especially have got high blood pressure. Now, I must tell you about something here. Now, it's called the potassium-sodium ratio. It's expected that you should be having at least 4 times more potassium in your diet compared to your sodium, and that basically helps to keep everything in order. Now, when you start eating or taking more sodium in, that disbalances the whole ratio, and that allows basically your body to behave oddly, which is hypertension in your case. Another food product to be careful about is the processed peanut butter. The commercially available ones, they also contain hydrogenated oils or sometimes added sugar or more salt than expected. Ideally, they should have just a pinch of salt in them, but sometimes more than that is usually the case with the commercial ones. So one has to be careful because I like peanut butter, and once I start, putting them on the bread and just eating them one by one, you forget about the time. Now, another food item that you need to be careful about is the frozen pizza. I like pizza as well, but again, the problem here comes in the total amount of salt or added components that it has. A typical serving usually has about 800 milligrams of salt in it, about 9 grams of fat, and about 8 grams of sugar in it. So all in all, it basically is not too healthy. And also it contains a lot of saturated fat, which is not good for your cholesterol levels as well. And one thing is for sure, once you start eating pizza, you forget about the number of servings you take. So it's always going to end up by being more than a single serving. Processed meat, on the other hand, which is usually preserved by curing, canning, or drying, or salting sometimes as well, can also contain a lot of salt in it, which is obviously going to add up to all the other forms of salt that you're taking in daily. Smoking is also unfortunately have been found to be associated with cancer. It's not the case all the time, but there has been found an association, especially if you're taking in a lot of processed or smoked food, meat more particularly, for a long period of time. High blood pressure, heart disease, COPD, and bowel cancer sometimes have been found or associated in patients who have used these smoked food items. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you eat smoked food, you get cancer. It certainly means that there has been an association found in the studies, and trying to avoid to consume long-term consumption of such food items is always going to be a healthy idea. Now, if you're looking to cut down on salt intake, it goes without saying you're also looking to cut down on cholesterol intake as well. Now, unfortunately, chicken with skin on contains a lot of saturated and trans fats in it. That, or food like red meat, butter, in combination with more salt, is only going to make your blood pressure worse. Now, as a bonus, butter and fried food are some of the other items that you should try to avoid. Here is a fun fact. A single small baked potato usually has about 93 kilocalories of energy in it and about 0 grams of fat. Now, turn them into French fries and you get about 319 kilocalories of total energy, and a good chunk of about 17 to 18 grams of fat as well. Now, you've converted essentially a non-fatty diet into a full fat, or basically a saturated fat containing diet item. So in conclusion, context matters. So if you happen to be one of those patients who, along with having hypertension, has got other risk factors like a family history of cardiac disease, stroke, or you happen to be a smoker or you drink, then you need to be more careful. Cutting down on these food items would basically allow you to live a long and a healthy life, but at the same time it will allow you the luxury to have some of the other food items that you might like. But I think the key message here that I would like to convey is that if you've got any of the risk factors that I've mentioned already, then I think one of the best things you could do is, along with obviously working on these tips, you should contact a dietitian and make sure you contact your doctor as well. There you go. So the food items that you should not eat, or you should try to minimize if you have high blood pressure. If you like videos such as these, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and also share this video among your family and friends, and also leave a comment down there if you've got any more questions. I will see you with another one of these videos. Until then, take care of yourself and everyone around you. Allah Hafiz.